Imagine standing on an island with no trees. Not one, just endless grass, black volcanic rock, and hundreds of giant stone giants. Some weigh more than 80 tons. They should never have reached these cliffs. Yet here they are. For centuries, everyone believed they knew the answer. A reckless society destroyed its own home. They cut down every last tree. They starved. They collapsed. It became one of history's greatest warnings. There is just one problem. Almost everything you just heard is wrong. Today we go back in time. We leave the modern world behind. Welcome to ancient Rapa Nui. It is the year 1200. A small group of Polynesian explorers arrives. They step onto a remote volcanic island. It is incredibly isolated, but it is not a barren wasteland. It is a lush paradise. Millions of giant palm trees cover the land. The canopy blocks out the harsh sun. The soil is rich and dark. The Rapa Nui people begin to build a life. They plant sweet potatoes and taro. They worship their ancestors. How do they honor them? They carve stone giants. They call them Moai. Deep inside the Rano Raku volcano crater, the sound of stone hitting stone echoes. Men use sharp basalt hand chisels. They carve directly into the volcanic ash. It takes a year to finish one statue. Some of these giants weigh 80 tons. They are massive. But the quarry is miles away from the coast. The statues need to protect the villages. The villages are built near fresh water. How do you move an 80-ton giant without wheels, without draft animals? For years, experts thought they used trees. Did they roll them on wooden logs? Did they build giant wooden sleds? No, that is part of the great myth. The Rapa Nui had a much smarter method. Look closely at the abandoned statues, the ones left on the ancient dirt roads. Their bases are wide and D-shaped. Their center of gravity is very low. They lean forward, almost 15 degrees forward. They cannot stand up on their own. Why make them this way? Because they were engineered to walk, literally walk. The islanders tie 3 ropes to the head, 1 rope on the left, 1 rope on the right, 1 rope pulling from the back. 18 people take their positions. They pull the left rope. The statue tilts. The forward lean makes it fall forward. It pivots on its curved base. Then they pull the right rope. The statue tilts the other way. It takes another step. Left, right, left, right. The giant stone ancestor waddles down the road. It covers 100 meters in 40 minutes. This isn't brute force. This is applied physics. This is genius. They don't need thousands of trees. They don't need giant wooden sleds. They just need teamwork and rhythm. But if they didn't cut the trees for rollers, why did the massive palm forest disappear? What killed the millions of trees? The answer is incredibly small. It came on the very first boats. The Polynesian rat, a silent, hungry invader. There were no natural predators here. The rats multiplied explosively. They doubled their numbers every 47 days. Soon, millions of rats swarmed the island. What did they eat? They ate the palm nuts, the seeds of the giant trees. They chewed through the hard shells. They devoured the life inside. Without seeds, no new saplings could grow. The old trees slowly died off. The islanders also used fire to clear farmland. The fire and the rats worked together. The forest was doomed. By the 1600s, the trees were gone. The island was completely transformed. Did the people starve? Did they turn on each other in a panic? No, the islanders did not die out. They adapted. They were survival experts. Without trees, the harsh wind howled. The soil dried up. Crops began to fail. So they turned to the stones. Millions of volcanic rocks littered the ground. They picked them up. They built rock gardens. They called it lithic mulch. They covered the dirt with small stones. The rocks blocked the harsh wind. They trapped the morning dew. They kept the soil moist and warm. They even leaked rich minerals into the earth. Inside these rock beds, food exploded. Giant sweet potatoes grew underground. The people ate well. Their population stabilized. Around 4,000 people lived peacefully. They had enough food. They had enough water. But their minds were changing. The giant statues were no longer enough. A massive drought hit the island. The old gods seemed silent. The lakes and the quarries dried up. The Moai carvings stopped completely. The people needed a new connection to the heavens. They looked up. They watched the migratory seabirds. Birds could touch the sky. Birds could touch the ocean. They were messengers from the spirit world. A new religion was born, the cult of the birdman. High on the edge of a massive volcano, the crater of Rano Kau, they built a stone village called Orongo. The houses were made of overlapping flat stones. They looked like tiny caves. Every spring, the warlords gathered here. They wanted to be the ultimate ruler, the Tangata Manu, the birdman. But the warlords did not compete themselves. They chose their strongest warriors. These athletes were called the Hopu Manu. Their task was incredibly dangerous. They stood at the edge of a 1,000-foot cliff. Down below, the ocean churned violently. A mile offshore sat a tiny, jagged rock, the islet of Motu Nui. The warriors climbed down the sheer rock face. They clung to vines and loose stones. One slip meant certain death. They hit the crashing waves. They swam through deadly currents. They floated on bundles of reeds, and the water was swarming with sharks. The warriors swam for their lives. They dragged themselves onto Motu Nui, bleeding and exhausted. Now the waiting began. They hid in dark, damp caves. They waited for weeks, sometimes even months. What were they waiting for? The arrival of the sooty tern, a sacred black-and-white seabird. Millions of birds blackened the sky. They descended on the tiny rock. The warriors searched frantically. They scoured the jagged rocks, looking for one specific thing, the very first egg of the season. A warrior spots a speckled egg. He snatches it up in triumph. He climbs to the highest peak of the islet. He screams across the roaring ocean. He yells to his warlord on the distant cliff, "Shave your head! You have the egg!" The warlord shaves his head completely bald. He paints his scalp bright red. He is now the birdman. But the warrior's journey is not over. He ties the fragile egg to his forehead. He dives back into the shark-infested water. He scales the 1,000-foot cliff. He hands the unbroken egg to his master. The birdman takes control of the entire island. He rules for 1 full year. This brilliant, brutal system kept the peace. It stopped endless wars over resources. The Rapa Nui people were thriving. They were a sustainable, living society. They had conquered extreme isolation. They had outsmarted a harsh environment, but they could not outsmart what was coming next. The true apocalypse was finally arriving. It is Easter Sunday, 1722. Dutch explorer Jacob Roggeveen drops anchor. He stands on the wooden deck of his ship. He expects to find a desolate wasteland. He expects to find starving, savage people, because there are no trees left on the island. But what does he actually see? He sees a thriving, healthy population. Thousands of Rapa Nui stand on the shore. They paddle out in small reed boats. They offer the sailors abundant sweet potatoes. They offer them sugarcane, yams, and bananas. The islanders are strong, friendly, and welcoming. There is absolutely no ecological collapse here. The ingenious rock gardens are working perfectly. The people have survived the rat invasion. They have survived the total deforestation. They have balanced their fragile ecosystem. But they cannot outsmart what comes next. The Europeans bring invisible, microscopic weapons, deadly foreign diseases. Smallpox sweeps the island. The isolated islanders have zero natural immunity. The strongest warriors are brought to their knees, gasping for air, their bodies consumed by a raging, unfamiliar fever. The stable population slowly begins to drop. But the ultimate nightmare arrives much later. It is the year 1862. Heavily armed pirate ships appear on the horizon. Peruvian slave traders storm the sandy beaches. They carry heavy muskets and thick iron chains. They violently attack the peaceful Rapa Nui villages. They capture over 1,000 healthy men. They kidnap the king. They kidnap the high priests. They steal the scholars who can read Rongo Rongo. 34% of the entire population vanishes, sucked into the dark wooden holds of ships. They are shipped to the coast of Peru. They are forced to mine toxic bird guano. They work in brutal, horrific, back-breaking conditions. 900 Rapa Nui slaves die in a single year. An international scandal forces the slavers to stop. 100 survivors are finally sent back home, but only 15 make it back alive, and they bring a horrific curse with them. They carry the deadly smallpox virus. The virus explodes across the tiny island. The sacred birdman cult collapses completely. The ancient culture is nearly erased from history. By 1877, almost everyone is dead. 111 people remain, from a stable peak of nearly 4,000. This was the true collapse of Easter Island. It was never an ecocide. It was genocide. Then foreign businessmen steal the empty land. They turn the entire island into a massive sheep farm. Thousands of fluffy sheep trample the sacred sites. They knock over the remaining stone giants. The surviving Rapa Nui are locked away. They are forced into a single walled camp, prisoners on their own ancestral island. For decades, the world believes a terrible lie. They say the Rapa Nui were foolish and greedy. They say they destroyed their own tropical paradise. They say they were trapped on the island, unable to escape their doomed, treeless rock. But modern science reveals a massive twist. DNA tells a completely different story. It looks at the ancient Rapa Nui genes. 10% of their DNA is Native American. How is this even possible? The island is thousands of miles from South America. They were never trapped. They were the greatest sailors in human history. Long before the Europeans arrived, long before Columbus crossed the Atlantic Ocean, the Rapa Nui built massive wooden double canoes. They sailed east into the infinite empty unknown. They successfully reached the coast of South America. They met the Native Americans. They traded with them. They intermarried with them. And they brought something incredibly valuable back home: the sweet potato, the very crop that saved them during the drought. They navigated back to their tiny dot of land, a microscopic target in a giant blue ocean. This was not a primitive failing society. These were absolute masters of the sea. They were brilliant masters of agriculture. They were genius masters of engineering. So why do we still tell the myth? So we look back at our own modern lives. The pressure is building, and that downward graph represents our own modern fears of losing everything. We look at global climate change. We look at our rapidly dwindling resources. We look at our own fragile, isolated planet. Earth is just a lonely island in space. We are terrified of destroying our only home. So we projected our own modern guilt. We projected it onto the ancient Rapa Nui people. We falsely blamed them for their own destruction because it makes a perfect, simple cautionary tale. But the true lesson of Easter Island is different. It is a powerful story of human resilience. They faced total ecological upheaval and severe climate drought, and they did not collapse. They innovated, they adapted, they changed their gods and their leaders. They completely reinvented their farming. They survived the harshest conditions imaginable, until the greedy outside world swallowed them whole. The resilient Rapa Nui people are still here today. Their giant stone ancestors still stand guard, watching the endless blue horizon